Hi, good evening. Today is October 29th, 2025, and it is 10:04 p.m. US Central Time. And I'm recording this video from my home located at the 26714 Valleyside Drive, Katy, Texas 77494. And my name is Rinaldo J. Aguiamarcan. So this evening, um, I have a few updates that I think are time sensitive. That's why I was doing a bunch of things this morning, today in the morning and then in the afternoon, and um, so I spent the whole day working on things and didn't get a chance to record this before, but didn't want to wait until tomorrow because it could be time sensitive, right? So there's a few things, and I apologize. I didn't prepare a list of things to talk about, so I'll try to go through them, by memory. Um, and I need to on the fly figure out a way to deliver them in a way that makes sense, right? So it's going to be challenging a little bit, but I think I should probably start by the most impactful things, right? Uh, so the finding of the last few days, right, were through data collection. I'm pretty sure at this point that they have a parallel, like a ghost cellular operator, right? Um, and some analysis I've been doing, it seems to be connected somehow to a company called Control Networks in New Jersey, owned by Ramon Sanchez, and that person is discussed in my website. I had interactions with him, so he's part of that thing. Anyhow, um, this hybrid network, right? So when I mentioned that yesterday, right, in the demo yesterday, October 28th, and the reaction was immediate. As I recorded that video from Lake Point Estates, and as I was coming back home, in a matter of maybe 2 hours, right, after maybe less, like an hour after I posted the video, as I was coming back home, in that video, I talked about. Let me share my screen with you 1 second. In that video, I talked about this cell tower, right, located here at FM 1463 and Cinco Ranch Boulevard, more or less, right? It's behind this car wash, which is owned by the network. Like, this car wash it's an asset, right? And that's why it's there, it's to protect that antenna. Um, so like an hour after, or maybe 2 hours after, as I was coming back home, they were installing, and it was like 5 p.m. They were basically tending a fiber uh, optic fiber, sorry, in English, right? An optic fiber connection, right? Exactly at this point, which has a straight line of sight to that antenna, right? And so what they were doing was replacing that, wireless link to these houses over here, which are important, right, with fiber. And another interesting thing that happened in the afternoon, as I was leaving Lake Point Estates, and this I'm not sure, right? What I'm going to say, I'm not completely sure because I've never seen him in person. Like, I don't know him in person, right? I've seen photos of him, but I've never met him in person. So it could be a body double, like, I don't know, right? I'm not 100% sure. But as I was leaving Lake Point Estates, right in the exit, right, at that point, a gentleman was coming in a bicycle, right, and intercepted me right in that corner, in that stop sign where you turn right to exit. And I believe that man was Robert Mueller. And this was like 2 hours after I recorded the video, right? Less, like an hour, right? And I think I've described before this TTP in which, when I mention somebody, right? Like, for example, if I say something impactful about one of the cats that they have here next to me at Palisade Drive, right? if I do something like that, when I go out, the next time I go out the house, they will pass that agent in front of me, right? It's kind of I think it's kind of a psychological technique, right? Gaslighting, right? Like to make you think that, oh, I'm crazy, right? Um, so then, I've seen this, they do this. I've seen this, experienced this firsthand. I would say, I don't know, maybe 150 times, something like that, right? Like at that level in the last 3 years, right? But it's always with low-level agents, right? Or with Phil Denning. Like they used to do this with Phil Denning a lot, right? Like if I mentioned Phil Denning when I was at Lake Point State, if I mentioned Phil Denning in a video or something, or in the website, next time I went out, they would pass him next, just in front of me, right? But yesterday, as I recorded that video where I mentioned the power line that goes into Mueller's backyard, right? And I hypothesized that it might be a communication link. When I left the house, I believe it was him. I cannot be sure because I've never met him in person, but I've seen photos of him, and that man looked like the photos I've seen, but older, right? And he was riding a bike. So I don't know if it was him or not, but I hope it was him, because if it was him, it would mean that he is not suffering from a neurological problem, right? Because he was riding a bike. Like I'm saying this because I in the pipeline, right? The pipeline a long time ago, like I don't know, a few months ago, it caught a bunch of articles that were published on prominent sites. I think there was one in Forbes or in the Washington Post, I can't recall, in which they were talking about that he had that he was suffering from a neurological condition, right? I don't recall exactly what the article said, or the articles. It was a bunch of different articles, right? But I mean, the person that I saw yesterday, if it was him, he was riding the bike perfectly, right? Probably better than I would ride it. And I'm a few years younger. So I hope that it was him, because that would mean that he's okay. So that's another thing that happened. And the other thing that happened, interestingly, is within a few hours after that video, both Morgan Heibner and Mr. Pickett, the new lawyer, representing now, so he was the lawyer representing my former partner in the appellate court. And he is now the lawyer, the lead attorney, because now she has a team of attorneys. He is now the lead attorney representing my former partner in the family court, in the state court. Sorry, in the lower state court. He also filed a document. So both Morgan Heibner and him, within moments of each other, both of them filed documents with the lower court, which is interesting for many different reasons, right? And I'm saying all this because all these little things, right, seem to me like confirmation that what I said hit them, right? Hit them hard. Which is in itself kind of a violation of their own TTP, right? Because their doctrine is to not respond, right? To not look panicking, in a way, right? No matter what I do, they try to not look panicking, right? But anyhow, so the two lawyers, right, Morgan Heibner and Mr. Pickett, both of them filed documents with the 387 court, different documents for different reasons. But this is interesting for a bunch of different reasons, right? So I haven't like ranked them, but I'm gonna go through them, as I remember them, right? So first of all, Morgan Heibner filed a notice of hearing for December 2nd to talk about her rejection from the case, right? And this has like several implications, right? And it has so many implications that I don't know where to start. For example, think about it for a second, right? So she is responding to the fact that I did not leave her, that I did not agree with she leaving the case, right? Because and they filed a document saying that I had agreed. But now she's filing a document saying that there's going to be a hearing about this. So she's admitting that what she filed before was fraudulent, was a fabrication, right? That there was no agreement and she knew it and she filed that, right? Also, yesterday being the 28th and the hearing being scheduled for December 2nd is roughly 33 days, right? And the reason for that hearing is to allow, so to convince, so for her to convince the judge to let her leave the case, right? So for that, she scheduled a hearing for 33 days out, right? But in April, when she scheduled the hearing about the temporary orders, right? She scheduled it for almost, I don't know, 37 days out, right? So something that should have been more urgent, right? Because supposedly, right, it was an emergency, measure, right, that she needed to get for her client. But she scheduled it 37 days out. But this thing that it's on her own interest, she scheduled it 32 days out, right, or 33 days out. Right? So faster, right? Faster than the temporary orders. Also, the matter is under an automatic stay, right? So she shouldn't be filing anything, right? But she is still filing things that benefit her personally, right? Because she committed all this fraud and she wants to be ejected from the case. So she is violating the automatic stay, filing things for her own benefit. I don't know if there could be something more sanctionable than that, or at least questionable, right? What else? Yes. So she ignored all the 5 pending motions for sanctions pending for ruling that I filed against her, right? She makes no mention of any of those in that filing. And, shouldn't she be objecting those motions before, addressing any new issues? Like, it just doesn't make sense, right? Any way you look at it, there's no way to justify that filing. I thought for a moment that it could be a way to kind of, and I've seen this technique before, right? So when they see some information that is very damaging to them, right, they will do things to try to prod me to, to prompt me to put new content on the website or on YouTube, right? So kind of the idea is that if I post new things, what's damaging to them will be pushed down, right? So maybe, right? Maybe they did that to see if I created a new video, and the previous video that talks about Robert Mueller and his, power line gets demoted, right, in the feed. Could be, I don't know, because it seemed like too many mistakes in one document, right? Yeah, so that's on the Morgan Heimner side, and then on Pickett or Piquet, I don't know how to pronounce it. It's interesting because he has never said a word remember, he has been the attorney of record in the 2 cases, both in the appellate court that got dismissed thanks to the fraudulent document of Morgan Heimner, and now in the 387. And in both courts, whatever I have filed, he has never said a word. Like, he has never replied to anything, right? Not no emotion, not an email, like nothing. He doesn't reply. Like, he's like, silent, completely silent, right? No matter what happens, he doesn't say a thing. But now, yesterday, he filed that document, right? And that document is interesting also for a bunch of different reasons. First of all, the document is an objection to my motion to recuse, right? And, I think I said this before, like, the motion to recuse is against the judge, right? And he is not the lawyer of the judge. He's the lawyer of the petitioner, right? So he's objecting to something that has nothing to do with her client. It's about the judge, right? And he has no. But I think it's a way to legitimize, because I made a demo the other day in which I mentioned that Morgan Heimner, on the record, on the September 11th, on the October 16th hearing, when she brought up that I had filed the motion to recuse, and she started objecting to it, right? And I said in the demo that day or the day after that it was amazing to see how Morgan Heibner, in a second, in a split of a second, transitioned from being the lawyer of the petitioner to being the lawyer of the judge, right? So it is possible that this document that he filed is a way to legitimize that action, right? That is unjustifiable, like kind of saying, well, I'm going to tell you what the document says, right? So he's objecting to my motion to recuse, and he's saying that it's a way that I'm trying to create unnecessary delays. That's his argument, right? Which is not true, because I went to the appellate court to force the judge, try to force the judge to sign the orders. I don't want any delays. I wanted the orders to be signed so I could appeal them, right? But they didn't want to sign them. And that's why I went to the appellate court. It would make no sense for me to create delays after I've been fighting on the appellate court to try to get this expedited, right? It's contradictory. But anyhow, his argument is that I'm doing this to create an unnecessary delay, right? Which doesn't make sense again, because also it makes the order unappealable, right? The order will never be signed, and I will never be able to appeal it, right? And I suffered the harm of not being able to be with my son for 2 months, right? So I get no benefit from that, right? Anyhow, that's his argument. But I think it's a way, right, to legitimize what Morgan Heiner did on the record, that big mistake of start attacking the motion, right, to recuse that is not against her or her client, right? So the angle is, oh, well, she was doing that because she didn't want the delay because that harms her client. I think that's what they want to like convey, right? So the two lawyers are attacking the same motion that is not against them or their client, right? It's against the judge. And I don't know if they, I mean, I don't know if they can object that. It's a motion that went to another judge, right? Like it was routed to another judge. I imagine would be the judge of the 11th, right? Again, I think her name is Brown, if I recall correctly. So yeah, so he filed a document, right? But if you read the document, and it's in the oh, you probably can. I would post it, because they mark all the documents private, so nobody can see what they're doing, right? So if you read the document is really, it's laughable. I mean, it's so simplistic, right? Like all it says is, this is to create an unnecessary delay, and he didn't. And there's a paragraph that says that I didn't prove that the judge could be perceived as biased. That's all it says. Like it doesn't say why or how or in what way I failed to prove that, right? And that, I say that's laughable, because if you read the motion to recuse, it has allegations against them, right? Against Morgan Heibner, the Adams law firm, and what they've done with the docket, allegations of fraud against two courts, right? And it has an unofficial transcript that shows that the judge didn't even rule on my verbal objections. And there is a record on the docket of at least 10 motions that were never ruled on by the judge, right? Timely motions. So I mean, like, it's undefendable, right? How can you say that I didn't prove that the judge could be perceived as biased, right? But you read the document and it's really laughable, right? So, but I think it's a way to play dumb, right? Like it's a way to say, oh no, I'm just an incompetent lawyer. I'm a cheap lawyer, and I'm incompetent, and I don't know what I'm doing, right? And any allegations of me being part of a criminal network would be beyond my capabilities, right? I think that's I think it's the document, I think is intentionally bad, right? To kind of downplay his, let's say his planning abilities, right? But it's funny. So both of them filed those two documents within hours of each other after I posted that video yesterday about Robert Mueller and the power lines, right? So it seemed to be like a like back paddling, right? Like well, we're now going to pretend that all this is just a regular case, right? And we're regular lawyers, and we're going to do what any regular lawyer would do, right? It's not something like that. But it felt like a reaction to the video, to be honest. Right. So okay, so that's on the legal front, right? And the status is, we're waiting for the answer to the motion to recuse. Um, uh, um, it seems like it's going to take a while. But now I'm going to transition more to more technical topics. Okay. Yeah. So I think I see the plan on how I'm going to do this. So I'm going to talk about. I'm going to continue on the train of thought of yesterday with the power lines, right? And you know, at Google, we had there was a meme. Memes are a huge thing at Google, right? Culturally, uh, there's there's an internal website where everybody can post memes about things that happen in the technical, in engineering, right? And it's a very funny. And there was a meme that it said, "The more you know," right? And it had like a bunch of rainbows and a unicorn, uh, this reminds me of that. I don't know why, right? Well, I guess I know why. It's because, knowledge is not linear, right? The more you know, the faster you will know more, right? So after I realized in the last few days, right, what they're doing with the power lines, it's one of those things, right, that after you see it, you cannot unsee it, right? Now I see this thing, I see what they're doing, right? So a lot of interesting observations, right? So, okay, so the first one of I don't know if the most important, right? But I realized something, right, about security, right, about network security. And I'm not an expert in that field, right? I'm just an engineer, right? I imagine maybe this is something that is obvious, right, to somebody that works in that field. But I learned it the hard way, right? And today I realized the thing. So the thought is something like, to protect the uplink, the important factor, right? I mean, there's two important factors, right? So one is how difficult it would be to get in the middle, because what they do is man-in-the-middle attacks, right? If you're using a cellular, they get in the middle, moving the vehicle at constant speed, they capture the MAC address, and then they decrypt your traffic, right? If you're using, in my case here, this connection is intercepted by them on the houses on the back, right? I know that. So this is Xfinity Comcast, right? So they have the houses on the back where the aggregators are, the taps, Xfinity calls them. And they own those houses, and those houses have the aggregators on the back, right? So either aggregator that I use, the owner of that house is an agent of this network, and they have a device in there that takes the traffic, right? It's another man-in-the-middle attack, right? Um, and if you're using a satellite connection that is not a Starlink, right? Because a Starlink, they control it like a puppet. But if you use any other internet connection, satellite, the uplink, it's hard, right? Because they will have to have something in the middle, right? Between you and the satellite, right? But if you think about it, so of the three things that I mentioned, right? Cellular, Comcast, and satellite, I'm talking about the uplinks only, right? The downlink of the satellite is very weak because they could put an antenna 50 meters, 100 meters from you, and they can catch what is coming down, right? But I'm talking about the uplink, right, which is what concerns them in the case of Robert Mueller, right? And I mentioned this before in the. Also, let me start by that. I think that because I didn't mention that in the video yesterday. So the observation, let's go to Lake Point State, right? So to show you what I mean. Sorry. Right. So he has this. You see these posts, right? These are the shadows of the post. The post actually, this is Eckhart's house, and the posts go inside his backyard and then go into Mueller's house. And this is one post over here inside of his backyard, right? And it terminates there. And to recap, the hypothesis is that this is really a communications link wired straight to his house, right? And okay, so you may think, well, he might be receiving messages there. But the hypothesis is that, yes, he could receive messages, but the real intention, the real purpose of this link is for him to send messages out. It's an uplink, okay, more than it is a downlink. And so the reason why I jumped to that inference is because, so think about it, right? If you were, imagine for a second that you have a way to intercept that cable, to put a hook into that cable, right? And read the encrypted data and then try to decrypt it. If you're getting messages coming to his house, you know that the recipient is him, right? Mueller. So I'm just going to oversimplify what I'm trying to say, right? It's more complex than this, but just the oversimplified version is the following. Imagine that you're trying to find the decryption key. What you can do is, well, assume that the message has the words Robert or Mueller, right? So you already know, even without decrypting anything, you already know two possible words that are likely to occur. And this reduces the search space if you're trying to find the encryption key by brute force. And this is a way to find it faster, right? This is what they call the well-known text attack, right? It's cryptanalysis. So because you know the recipient, you already have a cryptographic foothold that you can exploit, right? Now think about the uplink. If the message is going out, the recipient could be anybody in the world, right? So you have no clue of who is the recipient of this message, right? So you really have no foothold to try to brute force it faster. Right? So this cryptanalysis difference makes the uplink harder to intercept. Now, if the intention was the downlink, right, to secure his downlink because he's receiving a lot of important stuff, right? Imagine that scenario. Well, authorities could intercept the messages. They don't have to take that cable, right? They could go to the cell tower that is just like a mile away over here. Over here, right? Authorities could hook into this tower and intercept the downlink messages because they have to pass through the tower before they get to the high tension power line, right? So they could intercept the messages here. It's easier, right? Knowing that some of those messages are going to go to Robert Mueller's, right? And they know already the recipient, so they could brute force it, right? I guess the reasoning is that in the case of the downlink, the weakest link in the chain is what makes the whole channel weak, right? And in this case, the weakest point is this antenna. It's not the hardwire connection. So authorities could intercept the downlink here, right? So that tells me that, that hardwire doesn't really protect the downlink. It's unprotectable because there's some communications that go through the air, right? I'm saying some, not all, because that hardwire also goes to the house of the accountant, right? And I mentioned this before, like if you follow this power line that goes to Mueller's house, it also, let me show you, right? The same power line also comes to this street over here. And I think they removed the post from this image, but I saw them physically yesterday. I went there and I saw them. This street, Shadow Forest Drive, right? And the posts extend all the way to here. And next to this house is this house, as you can see, and this house is of the accountant, right? So basically, Robert Mueller has a wire connection point to point from his house to this accountant's house. Sorry, my dogs are. Just 1 second. Hello. Yes, sorry about that. Yes, so I was saying, so Robert Mueller has a direct wire connection, basically, from his home to the accountant's house, right? But other communications go through the wire, through the air on that tower, and that makes those communications weak. Okay. So the thought is that the real purpose, because the thought is that because of all that, the downlink is unprotectable, except if for messages that are coming from the accountant, right? It's the border case. But in the general case, which are the messages coming partially from the air and then traveling, being routed through the wire, those are really unprotectable because authorities could intercept them at the tower. So that tells me that the real purpose of the wire is to protect the uplink, right? Because that can be protected. Why? Well, because there is impossible to know who are the recipients, and that makes the messages harder to decrypt, even if they get intercepted at the wire, right? And also, if authorities go through the antenna, right? They will have to try to decrypt not only his, but all the other messages of this area that go through that antenna, right? So it's a much, computationally speaking, it's a much harder problem. But so, I think that the real purpose of that wire is to protect the uplink more than the downlink. And think about the implications of that, right? So if that is the case, what that would imply is that his role in the organization is a role of high authority, right? He is a person creating orders, basically, right? Giving orders to everybody. He's not, an agent receiving orders. He is giving them, right? It's a very different role. So they are super interesting. So, thinking of that, of the differences of, the weaknesses of the uplink versus the downlink, right? In all these different scenarios. And as I was mentioning before, right, if you compare cellular to broadband cable, right, and satellite, of the three, the strongest uplink is the satellite, which is counterintuitive if you think about it, right? Because, well, first of all, it travels through the air, right? You would think that something that goes through the air should be weaker than something that goes through a cable. Second of all, the distance is super high, right? It's 500 something kilometers, right? In the best case, right? It could be more. So there's a lot of chances for somebody to get in the middle, because high distance means a lot of opportunities, right? And yet, of the three, is the strongest channel, right? So that made me realize, well, before I tell you that, right? So there's one dimension that makes it an uplink. I think there's two dimensions, really, right? That what makes an uplink strong. Okay. One is, of course, the medium. For example, in the case of Robert Mueller, because that power line is high tension, nobody's gonna go and touch it, right? Because they could die, right? It would require expert knowledge of electricity and high tension equipment to even come close to that machine, right? To that cable. So that is a deterrent, right? In the case of the satellite, there's no deterrent, right? Like anybody can fly a plane in the path of the antenna and nothing will happen. And in the case of broadband, the deterrent is really that, well, a person that wants to get in the middle would have to buy the house that has the aggregator, right? But for this network, money is not an issue, right? Because then they don't pay taxes, they have their parallel economy, a bunch of different reasons. So they can buy any house they want, right? So that's not a problem. But the medium is one of the factors, right? But and that that I've known for a while. But what I kind of understood from this is that the second dimension that makes an uplink weak or strong is really how many hops there are till the first aggregator. Think about it, right? So all these networks, right, are decentralized networks, and then the packets jump from one node to the next, right? From your computer to the aggregator, from that aggregator to another aggregator, and that's how the data travels over the internet. So, for example, in the case of Comcast, it goes from this cable that I have in my computer to my modem, then from the modem to the aggregator, which is the house on the back that they own, and they have the equipment there to intercept all my traffic that goes through Xfinity. And then from there, it goes to an Xfinity control aggregator, right, in an Xfinity facility. So the number of hops between my computer and the first Xfinity control point is 3 hops, right? 1 hop to the modem, the second hop to the house in the back that they own, the network owns, and the third hop would be the Xfinity aggregator, right? So it's 3 hops distance, and that gives them 3 opportunities to get in the middle, right? Because the name of the game is to get in the middle as close as you can to the target, right? To the source that you want to capture. Because of network theory, right? Like if you are further away, you will have to control more things, right? Because the packets could travel in different paths. So you want to capture them closest to the source, basically, right? So it's 3 hops in the case of Xfinity. In the case of the cell phone tower, it's 1 hop, right? From my cell phone to the closest tower. But what is weak is not the number of hops, but the medium, right? Because it's radial communication, the signal travels in all directions, and they can put an interceptor, a man in the middle, anywhere in any 360 degrees around me, right? So that, in that case, the cellular is weak because of the non-directional characteristics, because it's omnidirectional, right? So you see, in one example, in the cable, what makes it weak is the number of hops. In the other example, the cellular, what makes it weak is the fact that it's omniradial, right? Omnidirectional. Now, satellite, although it's a long distance to the satellite, it has the best of the 2 worlds. It's only 1 hop. Like if I connect my computer direct to the modem, there is nothing in between my computer, because I can set up the modem in bridge mode. That means the modem doesn't even get an IP address, right? It's directly the satellite giving me, my computer, the IP address directly, right? So it's 1 hop. It's straight from my computer to the satellite, right? And it's directional. It's not omnidirectional, right? So for them to intercept it, they have to put something in that exact path in between the antenna and the satellite, right? So that's why it's the strongest link, because the number of hops is 1 and the number of directions is 1, right? I mean, this is so easy to see once you know it, right? But it never occurred to me to look at this way, right? But now that I know the underlying principle of what makes it weak, right? I understood something that it's nuclear, right? Nuclear. I understood. I mean, I think about it and it makes me laugh, right? Because it makes it so obvious what they're doing, and how weak this is what they're doing, right? This is trivial. It's trivial for authorities to get them, to catch them red-handed. So think about what I'm saying, right? The immediate conclusion is, well, before I tell you that, remember, right? What they're doing is modulating a signal, a digital signal, in between the peaks or the valleys of the AC current of these high tension power lines, right? What that means is, imagine you have a scene function, right? That is the power, right? The AC power, 60 hertz, I think is in the US. And then you have a signal embedded in that big signal, a small signal, right? And then you have a device that is basically like a modem, like the modem that you would have from Comcast, something like that, that has the ability to take the input power and from that carrier signal, grab the actual signal that is modulated and demodulated, right? That's why it's called modem. Modulator, demodulator, right? That's what the word modem comes from. It's the combination of modulator and demodulator. So this modem, they have to have a modem, right? This is a device that they would connect to that high tension power line and would transform that AC power, high tension, and would extract from it the actual signal, right? The message that they're transmitting, either inbound or outbound, doesn't matter, right? The same thing as your Comcast modem would do, or your satellite modem, right? The same idea. But, and this is where it gets nuclear. This modem, first of all, has to be a very special modem, right? Because this is high tension, like this is super high tension, right? Like I don't know exactly how many volts they have in that line, but looking at the size of the posts and looking at the caliber of the wires, and I could see them yesterday because in that street shadow, and I invite authorities to drive over there. This street has here it has a dead end, right? You cannot even enter on this side. You have to enter on this side, right, and then make a right. But oh no, sorry, I think I'm not saying that correctly. Yes, no, I meant this one. On this side, there is like a dead end street, okay, over here on Stockton Court. And in this segment, the power line is so low, and I was driving the Tesla when I drove over there. It's so low that I could see through the glass ceiling of the car, the glass roof, I could see the power line maybe, I don't know, I would say 10 feet on top of the car. Right? I could see the caliber of the cable. Right? It's like hanging low for some reason. Like they don't maintain that thing even properly. Right? So I can tell you it's high power. It's very high power, high tension. Right? But anyhow, what I was saying is that this modem, don't think about it as a Comcast modem. Don't think that it's going to be a small thing. No, I mean, this thing has to be able to handle this super high tension. I don't know how many volts they have, in that line, but this is not, this is not going to be a small device, right? I imagine it must be at least the size of a dishwasher. That's what I think intuitively. I haven't seen it. I've never seen one of these things, but I imagine it would be more or less of that size. Why? Well, because for obvious reasons, right? It has to have enough surface to be able to dissipate the heat. It has to have enough grounding facilities to be able to, to ground the equipment and avoid, death or serious injury if somebody touches the thing, right? It has to have certain physical characteristics that makes it impossible to be miniaturized, right? It has to be something of a generous size. And it's an equipment that is dangerous to handle, right? This is not a thing that you would have next to your children, for example, right? And also, it's an equipment that carries hazard of fire and electrocution, right, to anybody that touches it. And high electromagnetic radiation, right, all the time. So it's an equipment that you would naturally not want to have in your house. And it has the added, let's say, difficulty, right? Or no, it's not a difficulty. What's the word for that? Inconvenience, right? That if you're an agent and your house gets raided by the FBI, how you're going to explain that you have this equipment in your garage, right? I mean, they're going to ask you, what is the purpose of this, right? Why you have this 220 line, or I don't think it's 220, it's probably more volts. I don't know the voltage, but why you have this thing coming from the street, from the poles, connected to this thing in your garage? What does this do, right? It's a question that is going to be hard to explain. All this I'm saying because, well, number one, Robert Mueller cannot have the modem in his house. That's obvious, right? It's just not, it's not the way it's going to be, right? But remember what I said before. The two dimensions that make a link weak are the number of hops or the number of directions. Like imagine when I say number, the direction really is measuring degrees, right? But imagine that you put them in buckets of 10 degrees, right? So in a full circle, you will have 36 dimensions, right? So 36 directions like that you can point if it was 10 degrees each one. So assume that that measurement system, how many directions the connection has makes it more weak or weaker, right? Those are the two things that make it weaker or weak. So the number of hops, right? I mean, if you are this network, right, and you went through all this trouble to send that communication link to Robert Mueller's backyard, you are not going to put the modem a mile away. Because if you do that, you are going to fall victim of the other dimension. I mean, that you're going to create a lot of opportunities where the FBI could get in the middle between Robert Mueller and the modem, right? So what I'm saying is this modem, this magical device that we should be looking for, is a device. Well, repeat the characteristics, right? It's a device that is dangerous. It's big. It carries risk of electrocution. He cannot have it in his home, and he cannot be far away from it, because if he's far away from it, there's risk of interception in the middle, right? So, long story short, I think the modem is here. So this is kind of a substation, or I don't know what this is called, right? But it's a facility controlled by NSTOR. You can see that because the poles that come from the NSTOR substation come directly to here, and then from here to Robert Mueller's house. The area, the perimeter is closed, right? Completely closed. And from there, the electricity posts go straight to his house, right? So I think the modem has to be here, right? Is the most logical conclusion, because this would be something that checks all the boxes. Like, it's not physically in his home, so if there's a raid, nobody will find the modem. There's no risk of electrocution because it's outside of his home, right? And the distance is maybe 200 feet, right? We can measure it, right? Like, you see, this is 20 feet in the scale of the map. So I would say 20, 40, 60, 80, 100, 120, 160 feet, more or less, right? And this thing is under heavy surveillance. Why? Well, because they have his house, these houses, right? Like, this house is controlled by them. This is the Damon Sachs, right? Which is the son of the builder of this neighborhood, right? The person who built this neighborhood 20 years ago is his dad. And he was the employer of Penelope Suarez. So, there's a straight line of sight from the roof of this house to that substation or whatever that is, right? I don't know what you would call it. So this thing is under heavy surveillance, right? They also have this house. I think this is Langham, if I recall correctly, and Eckhart, right? And they have the church watching from here, right? Or from here, right? So it's the thing that is controlled, right? And of course, these houses, all this is owned by them, right? And I've reported some of them already to the IRS. So it's under surveillance from both sides, from all four sides, really, right? So that's why they're comfortable with putting that modem in that public space. Well, it's not public, it's fenced, right? That area is controlled and it has a gate that you cannot go in. But even if you could go in, right, there will be risk of electrocution, right? Because, I mean, this is high tension. I don't know what is going to go in. And they have it under surveillance, right? But I think this is where the modem would be, to be honest with you. And there's also this other piece of equipment here, right? Maybe this is one of the two, right? But if I was to guess, I would guess that it's actually. I mean, if I was to guess, because you see, there's different things, right? This other smaller structure, this, and this, right? If I was to guess, I would actually guess this one, right? Why? Well, because it's closer to the house, it's more secluded from the street, and it has a better view from the church, right? Which is the main surveillance hub. I mean, for security, right? It's the harder to get to, right? And it would be the closest to his home. But either way, right, one of these 3 or 4 structures, one of those has to contain this device, right? Because that will be the only way to satisfy the condition of only one hop, right? Which is what makes the link really secure, right? Because to intercept it, you will have to intercept it after it's demodulated, right? So you can decrypt it or try to decrypt it. So the modulation is another layer of security in a way, right? So after realizing this, right, then I started looking at the different cell towers that have this characteristic of being close to power lines, right? And now we're going to go back to the Valley Side area, right? So 26714 Valley Side. Okay, and we're going to go back to talk about this antenna that we talked about yesterday. Now you see this antenna is near the huge power lines, but there is no substation like power handling, power substation. Like it's not. It could be that it's combined with the telecom antenna, right? But it's not clearly visible. Where is it? So, but if you look at it closely, right over here, a few meters away, I think this is the facility, right? And it has the same characteristics. It's this thing that is closed off, fenced, right? So my hypothesis is that the modem of this antenna that is demodulating the signals is in this closed area, right? And after I realized that, I realized, well, this thing is close to the Second Baptist Church. Like this is actually the backyard of the Second Baptist Church. You can see it here, right? And this church, there's been multiple incidents in this church, and I'm reading about them in the books. I send the pastor the books. Like, it's an important network hub for sure. But it's the same pattern. You see, at Robert Mueller's house, there is a church with a power substation next to his house, right? And the power lines coming to his house after they get demodulated from this substation, right? And here you have the power facility here, the antenna here. I mean, the distance is longer, but it's also in the church, right? It's in the grounds of the church, right? So, and then I started looking for this pattern, and it is the pattern, right? The pattern is churches with high acreage that have cell phone towers and a power substation next to it or close to it. Right? That is the pattern. So I developed a metric. The metric, I basically turn these observations. This is what I do, right? I turn these observations into things that are measurable. And then once I can measure them, I can compute the numbers across the planet if I want, and then rank them, right? How many occurrences there are in, I don't know, in an area with 100,000 inhabitants, something like that, right? And that's exactly the metric. So the metric is you take an area of 100,000 inhabitants and count how many cell towers there are in the grounds of churches that have, well, you start by that. Cell phone towers in the grounds of churches, right? That is the first metric. And I call that metric, I usually give them funny names. I call this metric religious cellular towers per 100,000 inhabitants. Right? If you compute this metric, you will find hubs of this network. And I already did this exercise, and it works beautifully. And then I developed a more advanced metric, which I called OPEC plus religious towers per 100,000 inhabitants. So it's the same metric, but where the towers are combined with a power station within line of sight, like in this example over here, right? Exactly. It works even better, right? So you see, these metrics seem to confirm the hypothesis of one of the books, right? Is this conjunction of theology, right? Because these are churches, right? They're being misused, but they're, disguised as churches, right? But is the use of theology, energy, right? Because power, these power lines, I mean, that's energy, right? Now, I don't have yet a way to know if this is fossil power, like from oil and gas, or if this could be nuclear power. I don't know, right? I have to do more research to understand that. But I would guess that it's fossil, right? Because of the OPEC plus countries. But it's the conjunction of theology, power, fossil power, and telecom, right? Telecommunications, which is what they intercept, right? Let me see if I can show you something here. Right. So here's an example, right? I took this photo today, right? So this is an example of, and this is on the 99 South. You can see the power station on the bottom, right? It's right there. This is the power substation, and you can see the high tension lines, and this high tension power line tower is kind of crowned by an array of cellular antennas, right? Which is, as I said in the previous video, is counterintuitive, because if you are designing a cellular network, you will want to put those antennas far away from those power lines because of distortion and noise and interference, radio frequency interference, right? But I think it's one of those. To be honest, I think it was laziness, right? Because with the resources they have, what would it have costed them to design this in a way that the cellular towers were separate from the power lines, right? Nobody would have noticed this, but they would have to have done more work because they're lazy. They, put the thing on top of the towers that they had already built, right? So it's a giveaway, basically, right? Let's see. Yes. Okay. So then this morning, I went to Tesla to do something there, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. But I went to this one. Where is it? 99. It's somewhere over here. Yes. Yes, this one, right? So there is this church over here called River Point Church, right, in Richmond. And it also has this characteristic, right? It has the power facility here. You can see it here, right? High tension power. And they have a huge antenna, which I think they even disappeared. Yeah, they erased it. Look, but you can see the shadow. You see the shadow here? You can see the shadow, but they erased the antenna, right? But I took photos of it. I have the photos. I'll post them. So here there is a huge antenna next to the power, and on the back of this church. Now I have to tell you, this church, and today was Wednesday, right? And I went there like at 11 a.m. Right? So it's not a day of service. I understand that these are community, gathering opportunities, and they do other things beyond service, right? I understand that. But when I went there today, this thing looked to me, this is anecdotal, right? But when I saw the situation, this looked to me, the feeling I got was like when I was in California at the Google campus, right, working. like, people walking around talking about, like the atmosphere felt like a campus, like a like a work environment, right? Like this felt more like an office than a church. I mean, looking at the vibes in the parking lot and the people in the parking lot and what they were doing, right? um and again, the church has high acreage. Like, if you look at the thing, right, it's an immense buffer zone, right? Nobody can get close to it if they're not part of the church, right? And it has on the grounds a high tension power line distribution going through it, and a substation. And next to the substation, they have the antenna. And I believe it's the same thing, right? So they're demodulating the things that are coming to the church. And that's why the substation has to be close to the church and to the antenna, right? The three things have to be close together, clustered. So there's no opportunity of interception, right? What they're minimizing is the number of hops after the signal has been demodulated, after the message is understandable, right? There has to be only one hop, as in the example I described between my modem and the satellite. So that is what makes the uplink secure, right? And again, I think this technique is to protect the uplink, not the downlink. So in the case of this church, for example, or the Second Baptist that is close to my home here, those are places where orders are given, right? More than where orders are received. And that's why the focus on the hardwire connection, right, is to give orders, not to receive them. So these are important control points of the network. Super interesting. So the reason I went to Tesla today was because I wanted to, I ended up buying it through the app, but I bought a roof rack, okay, that I'm going to install on the car to install equipment, the super antenna on the top, so I don't have to have it underneath the glass. Because this is a passive technique that I'm using, passive listening, and I want to eliminate anything in between me and the stars. So I'm mentioning this because the last time I ordered something in the Tesla.com, which was like maybe 3 years ago, this network compromised the supply channel, the supply chain, and gave me a pair of umbrellas that were bugged, right? And I imagine, because of their level of expression, and they know what I'm going to do with that roof rack, that they're going to bug it, right? Which is really silly, because the entire car is an espionage machine. I mean, what else can you put on that car, right? But they're going to put something additional, right, to try to figure out what is that I'm doing. So it could be an opportunity, right, to catch them red-handed. So that's why I'm mentioning that. Now, speaking about Tesla, something interesting happened, okay? And this, I mean, I don't know, right? It's intuition, right? I don't have any way to know if this is the case, but it's one of those things that I look at the situation and I see this is probably what they did, right? And I'm going to say it in case. As I'm in the Tesla dealership, and I'm talking to the person, right? He asked me for my phone number, and he looks up my account. And I see in his screen that I have in my account only one car. And this is strange to me, because I have two cars. I mean, I paid for the two cars, for the two Tesla, right? The black Tesla that my former partner is driving, but I paid for that car. And I'm on the registration and the title. And the red one, right? And in his computer, I only see the red one. So this was strange. So when I get home, I install the app to be sure, right? And I put in my credentials, because I stopped using the app the minute I realized Elon Musk was behind this, right? That's why I call the geo index the Elon Musk geo index, because he is a fundamental piece of all this. Now, I uninstalled the app 3 years ago, and I haven't used it anymore, right? But today I install it to see what is the black car. I log into the app, the black car is gone. It's not attributed to my account anymore. Now, this is interesting because, and here I don't know, right? Like I didn't ask, but it's interesting because I don't think my former partner can unilaterally remove, she shouldn't be able to, right? To remove that black car from my Tesla account without my permission, right? I never removed the car. It was removed. And I imagine it was her fearing that I would track the car. I'm not, I would never do that, right? I'm not them, right? But I imagine, right? Something like that. But I'm mentioning this because I imagine, right? I imagine Tesla is not going to do something crazy, right? Like remove the car unilaterally from my account to benefit her, because that would expose them legally, I guess, right? Like if the thing gets uncovered, they're gonna get investigated, right? So the theory I have is that maybe they made the mistake of sending to Tesla the TRO, the mysterious TRO index 7. And my hypothesis is that maybe in that mysterious TRO that they were open to change, right, at some point if they needed to, but in the original version of it, there was a mention about the black car, right, saying that she would have possession of the black car to transport the child because it was an emergency, right, something like that. And maybe they sent that to Tesla to remove the car from my account. This could be important because it could allow anybody, authorities, right? Anybody with access to subpoena that, to see the version, to see what is that Judge Bell signed, right? Because this is a mystery to this point. Like nobody has seen this document except Morgan Heibner. So maybe Morgan Heibner sent that document to Tesla to get the car removed from my account. Or maybe she sent a letter, you know, how they, create documents that say anything, right? That is not a problem. So maybe she created a letter as an attorney explaining the situation to Tesla. I don't know, right? I don't know exactly how they did it, but they must have sent something to Tesla to justify Tesla removing the car from my account and assigning it to her when I'm on the title of the car, right? And the car was paired to my account. So maybe they made that mistake, right? Maybe they left the TRO, the index number 7, maybe Tesla has it. It's possible, right? I don't know. But if Tesla has it, it was a big mistake, right? Because then we will be able to see, we could, right? If this gets investigated, what exactly was in that TRO, right? And I guess it could solve a lot of questions, right, that are in the air. By the way, that's one of the things, right? Like, I forgot to mention this. Pickett objected the motion to recuse, but he did not address the urgent request to produce the missing index number 7 that they must have. Neither him or Morgan Heiner, like they ignored the request, right? Which is something that they need to do because, I mean, they're obligated to serve me with this document, and they haven't. But they ignored that, and they started filing motions that benefit them personally, right? Yes, so it's possible, right? It's possible they sent something to Tesla to justify that change, because I don't think Tesla is going to get in the middle and take liability for no reason, right? In legal liability, right? Like removing the car from my account without my consent when it's my car, right? I paid for it. She didn't pay for it. I paid for it. And I think, right, they need to have that in the TRO, because they saw that I called the police. I called 911 when the child was taken. They had no way to know if I was going to report the vehicle as stolen, right? I could have done that. I wasn't gonna do that because my goal is not to get her in trouble. That's the last thing, because she's the mother of the child. But they must have calculated that was a step that I could have taken, right? And they needed to protect against that. So I imagine in that TRO, there is a mention about the black Tesla, giving her permission to drive the black Tesla. And if they have that, right, if they went to the extent of putting that in the TRO, it's because they needed to use it. Otherwise, they wouldn't have put it. Like if they saw no risk, they wouldn't have put it, right? And if they saw risk and they took the step of removing the car from my account, they must have, taken that step using a legal shield, like the TRO. So I think it's very likely that they use that TRO for that. It's possible. Um, yes. So, but to recap, right? These metrics about uh, the number of religious cell phone towers per 100 inhabitants is the bomb, right? And you can see in this area, in Sugarland especially, right? It's a heavy metric in Sugarland and Katy. And it makes no sense if you compare it to things like New York, right? This phenomena doesn't happen in New York City, right? Well, it happens, but not as often, right? Which doesn't make sense because if you have higher population in a small area, you will need more cell phone towers, right? So if this was really a natural occurrence, it would occur as well in New York, and you would see these power stations all over, Manhattan with cell phone towers attached to them, and you don't see them. Um, so I don't know. It's not looking great, to be honest, for them. I mean, because imagine, right? What is going to happen when the other 98% of the world start looking at the map and realize what they're doing, right? This works when nobody knows. But if 98% of the planet understands this, what are these people going to do? You know, it's um, so I had another item about packaging things, but I think I'm going to leave it for another session because that's going to be a longer conversation. So I'm going to leave that for tomorrow. Okay. And I have a bunch of other small things. I have a yes, another thing that I saw, and I've already published this on. Let me show you. So the other confirmation I saw today, this morning, was that they were installing fiber in this house, and this house this is an important agent, Chinese, right? And I've known that for months, right? And this morning, just hours after I posted the other video, they were installing fiber in front of his home, like optic fiber. So that tells me that they see the messages coming from his home or going to his home as risky, right? And now that it's known what they're doing with the Ghost cellular network, they want to have a way to communicate with him or from him that is secure, right? And less prone to interception. So it's very important. And the other house where they were doing work of the same nature with Inframark was this house, 10110. So, and since zero, it's financial channel, Kelser Clove Lane. Right? And I believe these two were in direct response to the video of yesterday. And just to let you know, this one, I think, is one of the most prominent agents of all this area. So he would be like the commander, right, of this Pine Hills area. And I have a bunch of data points to support this hypothesis, right? And I'll share that with authorities when the time comes. But he's the most important one in all this area. And well, to do it correctly, if you go to the Call Mobile channel, just 1 second. Oh, I'm missing the ampersand. Okay. Yes. So yeah. So the commander of this Pine Hills area is this guy, Chi Chen. And the other house, the one that I believe is on the financial channel, is this one, Shirley Rodriguez, but that's an alias, right? It's actually a man. I've seen him. But they put a woman's, the cowardice doctrine, basically. And the truck that was installing the fiber had the plate WMG 6534. And the US dot number is 980860. And also there was an Inframark truck. They were working together on installing that fiber. So that was this morning, October 29, 2025. So with that, I think I'm going to close this session. I'll see you again tomorrow. Have a good night. Bye-bye.